Well, welcome back. You may remember at the end of our last session, I had shared with you that this session was entitled Wise Guys. Now, some of you who know me know that I grew up in New Jersey. Many believe is home of the wise guys, but that's not the kind of wise guys we're going to be talking about today. Now, we'll be talking about the guys and gals that possess wisdom and how you seek them out and how important that is in your leadership journey. These are people that have been there. These are people that have walked the roads that you're now walking or maybe about to walk. And they have the battle scars to prove it. They're people that have been on the mountaintop, but not without the valley experience. These may be people that achieve significant position in life. Some of our greatest leaders have acquired great wisdom along the way. But one thing I want to caution you on, when seeking out wisdom, don't let position or lack of it exclusively dictate who you seek counsel from. Some of the wisest people I've known didn't have CEO or president or senior operations director of the known world after their name. Often they were humble men and women who've chosen to lead quietly, to put others first, and take on the role of a true servant leader. Another caution is this: don't assume that if they don't have a little snow on the roof or gray around the temples, that they can't have some valuable wisdom to share. Listen, there's no question that on many fronts, you'll need to have been around the block a few times to really possess some wisdom on a given topic. And I'll admit, I can be biased in terms of thinking that someone much younger than me can't have any real wise counsel to offer. But we have to remember that on some topics, having been around a while can be a disadvantage. If you're trying to reach a younger demographic, for example, with a product or a recruitment effort or a worship style or a message in your church, going to the 50 or 60 somethings for all those answers may be the wrong route to take. If you're trying to get underneath what makes a 20-something team member tick that's on your team, you may need to seek some counsel from a bright and intuitive young 20 or 30-something. It's times like this that we have to acknowledge that those of us that have been around a little while don't have our finger on the pulse of what it's going to take to be effective in that area or with that particular person or demographic of people. This is why you want 2 or 3 wise guys or gals as go-tos, when you're facing a challenge, when you need direction. Paul hits all of this directly at the outset of chapter 5 in 1 Timothy. He says, "Do not rebuke an older man harshly, but exhort him as if he were your father. Treat younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, and younger women as sisters." See, he's saying respect should be given to all, and wisdom can be obtained from the young and the old. That in itself is a great piece of wisdom. I've got some personal examples of each of these scenarios. Awesome men, in my case, is the examples I'm going to use, that I was privileged to work with and who often shared wisdom that I benefited from. The first came into my life several years ago. It was when I was leading the operation in Knoxville that I mentioned in one of our earlier sessions. His name was Brian, and he was one of the team managers who reported to me. So from an organizational perspective, Brian was below me on the org chart. He was beneath me on the organizational paper. In fact, after I was promoted to run the entire operation, Brian was actually 2 bites beneath me on the food chain. But that didn't keep me from seeing the wisdom that this man brought to many challenging questions that we faced together. Brian was probably 15 years or more my senior, and he had had some good people experience over his life. He was thoughtful. He was good at stepping back to see the big picture. He asked good questions, not often letting you know that he actually felt he had the answer in his back pocket already. But he was a good man to have on the team, someone I knew I could bounce things off of to get a different perspective. More recently, I had the honor of working closely with the pastor of our recovery ministry that I helped lead at my prior church. Pastor Chad and I worked more closely, and I grew closer to him than most anyone that God's put in my path in many, many years. We complemented each other well as we strove to lead that ministry with excellence. And even though Chad was 15 years my junior, I learned a lot about grace and passion from him. He helped to offset my natural tendency to overanalyze things with his penchant and passion for charging ahead and taking the hill for Jesus. These are two men that to this day I would look to for advice when facing a challenge. And here's what I know. They'd provide that advice, but only after asking me good questions and with my best interest at heart. You need people like that in your life to increase your wisdom, to round you out, to fill in those gaps. So ask good questions of wise people and surround yourself with people who also ask good questions. The questions that they ask may increase your wisdom as much as the answers they give you. You know, Solomon was just 20 years old when his father, King David, died and passed the throne on to him. God came to Solomon in a dream and said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Wow. Now, there's an offer you won't get every day. There's an offer you shouldn't refuse. So think of all the things Solomon could have asked for. What would you have asked for? He could have asked for tremendous wealth, rule over his enemies, long life, or perfect health. But at 20 years old, here's how Solomon responded to God. He said, "God, I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties." Now, that's being pretty self-aware and transparent, isn't it? Then he goes on with his request. He says, "So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong." He asked God for wisdom. Well, God not only gave him the wisdom he asked for, but he gave him great riches and honor as well. Solomon became the richest, most revered, and yes, the wisest man who ever lived. Great leaders from near and far traveled all across the region just to listen to him make difficult and wise decisions. He went on, of course, as you may know, to write most of the book of Proverbs, which is, just exploding and bursting with wise teachings. In Proverbs, Solomon says, "Wisdom is supreme. Therefore, get wisdom." He also says, "He who walks with the wise grows wise." That's exactly what we're talking about here. Walking with the wise will grow your wisdom. One of the most important things you'll do, not just in leadership, but just as you navigate through life's challenges, the challenges life will throw at you, and it will. One of the most important things you'll do is to seek wise counsel. So what's the practical application for this session? Well, we've hit them. Here's the takeaways. First, identify, if you can, 2 or 3 people that you know will be able to provide wisdom when you face tough decisions or circumstances. If you don't have 2 or 3 out of the gate, that's okay. Start with 1. But strive to build that inner circle of a couple of different perspectives of wisdom to help you through those circumstances. Next, who are these people? What are they like? Who should you be seeking out? Well, in many cases, they're likely to be a little older and more experienced than you. But don't overlook the wisdom of having someone from the generation that came after you as part of your inner circle. Third, don't construct your wisdom team with people who have all the same strengths or attributes you have. That can be a draw. That can be a tendency that we might have. Remember my example of Pastor Chad? We had some very different strengths. But because of that, we made each other stronger. We filled each other's gaps. We really completed each other as we led in ministry. And I believe we gained wisdom from each other. Last, read chapters 3 and 4 of 1 Kings to get a really good snapshot of King Solomon's wisdom and his life. Then read the book of Proverbs. Take your time with it. Anytime you're struggling at all with the who, the what, the when, the where, or the why of any aspect of your life, I'm telling you, you'll find guidance in the book of Proverbs. One other thing that truly wise leaders do is to be sure they're taking care of themselves and their families. And that's what we're going to talk about in in the next session. It's so critical, so important that you care for yourself and for your family. If you can't and don't do that well, it'll affect everything else you do, including your leadership. So next time we'll talk about that. Care for yourself and care for your family. Hope you gained some wisdom from today's session. Thanks so much for being with you, praying for your ministry. Thanks again. See you next time.